Thank you. Members, I formally welcome everyone here to the first committee meeting after the summer recess, and I think it is given that everybody's refreshed and ready to go, and ready for action. Okay, so first item is apologies. I have an apologies from Stuart Dixon and Michael Copeland, and no other apologies to record. Thank you. Moving on to the draft minutes. And that's on page 5, just to formalise if members are content with the draft minutes for accuracy. Are we agreed with the draft minutes? Okay, take it as agreed. Thank you very much. Next item, chairperson's business. Just to note that we've received an invitation to attend a visit to the Parliament building by the BBC Director General. I think this invitation has been extended by the Chair of the Committee of Culture, Arts and Leisure to myself and the Deputy Chair. I can't even recall the date of that with respect, and my apologies for that, so I'll have to look at that. But if in the event if we can't go or I can't go, and I'm not going to speak myself at this moment in time, I don't know, so we'll have to reflect on it.
Yeah.
I'll advise members even by email. Okay, moving and then to matters arising, and that follows on from the the closed section. Obviously, we'll not be dealing in this particular section with the matters discussed under the closed section, so that's still extant and for the next Thursday. But there's a number of issues I just want to raise in terms of, first of all, phase 1 of the inquiry, the debate. Just to remind members that there will be a debate on the report in the phase 1 of the committee's inquiry, and that's to take place on Monday, the 8th of September. The indicative timing we have so far is 3:30 to 4:50. That's on Monday. The next item on 4.2.
4:50, did you say? Not the usual 90 minutes then?
The usual, isn't it?
Yes, it was 2 hours, but that's the indicative times that just came out the other day. I've indicated that.
It will be an hour and a half, won't it? Maximum of an hour and a half. That's what it normally is.
It's normally an hour and a half, but Chair, they did contact me to get an indication of whether there may be required longer time. It required. And I said, well, with 2 hours. And I did say
scheduled less than the hour and a half.
Yeah.
I will speak to the.
It seemed odd to me, like.
But it's 4:50. That's the indicative timing so far. Do change.
So maybe get that clarified for members, because I'm sure we need to know that. Okay, so 4.2 in terms of matters arising, dealing with the witnesses, additional witnesses for phase 3. I want to refer members then to the written submissions in relation to phase 3 of the inquiry, which have been received since about the summer recess, and these are included between pages 12 and 35 of your pack. The committee agreed to write to these witnesses in the first instance, then to review their submissions and decide whom it wished to call to give oral evidence. You will recall there's another number of people who are already given notice.
John, can I ask, see just on the list of witnesses, I mean, obviously this part, especially given the allegations made by BBC about the breaching of the ministerial code, it seems remiss that we haven't actually asked BBC to come along and explain that situation, and also given the fact that other parties made representations on the same issue, also Unionist Party and the Alliance Party, why we haven't asked members of those two parties to come along, because it may throw some light actually on the context, the constituency context in which this whole issue arose.
No, we haven't actually called any of those witnesses. We actually asked them to give us a written submission, which we have, and then on that basis, then we determined then we would agree if we needed to call any of those individuals for oral evidence. And I have no issue at all with your suggestion there, because I think we're going to be back in this the argument with the BBC. So I think, and bear in mind, the approach that we ended up adopting was that we exhausted, and that was based on the legal advice that we have been receiving repeatedly, that we need to exhaust all of the evidence in terms of evidence gathering before we would go to the BBC to ask them back again. Now,
Well, I still think, regardless of how they responded to us in the past, we should still be putting it up to them.
I have no difficulty.
And the sooner the better.
And the sooner the
Start
better.
that
Yeah, no,
process.
I mean, I would fully endorse that myself. Like,
Chair, can I just maybe throw some bit of light on that? We've been engaging with the BBC in relation to the information that they have in respect of phase 3 of the inquiry, and we've been informed by their legal department that they will be looking at the information that they have, and they will be forwarding information to us, quite possibly as early as next week. So we're following the same process as we did with the initial, phase 1, which was to inform the BBC of the information that we had, and then to ask them for their information. And they are now in the process of deciding what, if any, information is going to come to us. But they have indicated that they'll be sending some information to us next week.
And are we going to add the other 2 parties that made representations to the Housing Executive?
well, we can do that, and in fact, what I'm going to suggest is that perhaps that today, I mean, obviously, in my view, we could, with another week, with a week now, in a way, lost, but we're taking a week to consider that information we received earlier on. So, in my view, we don't necessarily need to decide if we wish to call any of these people as a witness. But we should then consider certainly including the BBC on that list and the other 2 parties that you referred to. So we likely will. I mean, I'm sure we will. And I have no doubt that we will want to call the BBC, for example. And there'll be other people on that list would need to be called. We don't need to determine that today unless people want to put a formal proposal that we do call a certain number, or all of them for that matter. I mean, it's easy done. But
I think it's, your suggestion, let's see what the written evidence is and then decide, look, that those are worth calling,
Yeah.
or are they not worth calling?
okay. So, I mean, our members then content with respect to that we deal, again, we're going to be dealing with that then presumably next Thursday, because we will need to determine, again, this is all about making sure we're not adding any slippage into this which we can do without. So we're going to deal with this next Thursday, and then that allows us then to schedule the witnesses. That fair enough then? We'll do that on that basis next week, so people have had a chance to read through the submissions, and this is the first day back, so I'm happy enough that we take that approach myself. Everybody content with that aspect of it? Yep. So again then, page 10.
But could I?
Sorry, Jim.
Can I say clarification on a number of matters? I can't recall how we arrived at the point of who we're asking to give written evidence and who we're asking to give oral evidence, but having read some of it, it strikes me, for example, Jenny Palmer's evidence goes to the heart of the question: was there inappropriate political interference or attempted interference in the workings of the Housing Executive? I would have thought it's very difficult to conduct this inquiry without hearing oral evidence from Jenny Palmer, and also from the administrator, because there's been an allegation that meetings were held that the administrator should have been at, and he's silent on that, as far as I read him, on his written submission, so I thought I should hear from him. And indeed, Mr. Robinson seems maybe anxious to be heard, because he forewent the opportunity of defamation proceedings because he was so impressed with the breadth of the powers of this committee, and that the investigation would be without any constraints. So maybe he's anxious to give us evidence. So I think I hope we're not pigeonholing people and saying, well, we're only going to hear from them in writing. We have the opportunity to hear from all these people if needs be. Is that
I
right?
think there are, I mean, Kevin may explain, but there were some clear sequencing of, in terms of witnesses, but Kevin can elaborate a bit further on that. There's no doubt that at least a number of those people who have asked to give us a written submission will be invited. In fact, we'll now have another some addition to that. So I think and obviously what we want to try and do, so we will expedite this next week, because we do need to make sure we have the sequence.
Just on the sequencing, could I suggest that it would make more sense to hear early on from Mr. Brimstone, because he does seem to be at the heart of any allegation of inappropriate pressure, and I think it would be important to hear from him what it is he says he did or didn't do, and then hear from people like Jenny Palmer, etc.
But let's hear from Kevin Which would suggest, obviously maybe briefly now, but what it would suggest is on the basis that we're going to reflect on all of this, and then next week we'll make a decision on all who will be additionally be wanting to be bringing as witnesses, and then have the sequencing plan written out for us. If you,
Could I just finish the other point I want to raise? Have we got all the documentation that's referred to in these written submissions? For example,
I'm going to come on to some of that in a minute.
Susan or Heather Cousins gives us a document which refers to all sorts of briefings. We got all that.
A very considerable number of documents from the department that covers all the minutes of the meetings. We have internal communications. We
Has
have
that yet been distributed to us?
no, we haven't yet. We were well. There's a certain amount of logistics in terms of putting that together and getting it to members for their respective meetings. What we had hoped to do would be if members were content with the schedule as it's laid out there, starting on the 18th with the departmental officials. And Sharon, this is the point that you related to. We're starting with our proposal was to start with the senior existing departmental officials, some of the key former housing executive officials, and then moving on to a list. And you see that we only ask for the written evidence, so that for those people who are, other than two, who are not departmental officials but are other MLAs and Red Sky executives and the auditors that were brought in, for members to reflect on that written evidence and then decide if any of those witnesses they want to hear any oral evidence from those. That was the approach that was taken. Now we have all the evidence that we have asked for at this point in relation to from the department. So we have all that now, and that will be disseminated in the lead up to the first evidence session.
Have we got the outcome of the internal
We
investigation?
don't have all of it, and I was going to come to that actually, because it's just at one point on that. And this is where we're back into, I have to say, a potential bit of tension here, because we are advised that, and I mean, the clerks here have been going to the department for several months in relation to the fact-finding exercise, documentation what happened to the fact-finding exercise, and we'll note that Jenny Palmer has referred to providing an interview for that. We've been chasing the department for several months on that. At one point we were advised that it was subject to an internal disciplinary matter, and therefore we couldn't have access to that. We have now, very, very recently, been advised that the fact-finding exercise was in fact completed last year within a month and returned to the department, and we're advised now that it is with the Minister for a year. Now, I just find it, and I hope we're not starting the second phase where we don't have documentation, because remember, we dealt with this with the Permanent Secretary on a number of occasions where we were deeply, deeply frustrated with the fact that we had to continually seek documentation. Some of which we discovered that we hadn't got ourselves, some of which was just held back for whatever reason, and we had a variety of reasons explained to us, that, you know, the unique type of an inquiry and difficult circumstances and so on and so forth. But and we did certainly close major gaps. But here's a report which we had been looking for, didn't get, and now in the last sort of few days we've been told it's with the Minister for a year. Now I don't know if it's with the Minister for a year or not. That's what we're being told.
Chair, if I refer you to pages 22 and 23 of your tabled items, they refer to the department. They did write to us in September 2013 and said that the fact-finding exercise is concluded. But maybe just want to remind members that fact-finding exercise was initiated and it was carried forward by a senior official within DFD. That started in August of 2013. It concluded in September 2013. The committee was advised it was concluded, but we had been following up with the department subsequent to that as to what the outcome was, because there was implications in relation to what Mr. Allister has just referred to in terms of key witnesses. There were implications potentially for taking evidence from witnesses who were also involved in the fact-finding exercise if there was going to be an internal disciplinary issue. So we've been told, as you see on the page 23, on the 11th of April, that it was an internal departmental matter relating to a member of staff. It's inappropriate at this time to provide a comment in the matter, but at the conclusion of the matter, it's the Minister's intention to inform the committee of any outcome. As it stands now, as the Chair rightly said, the report, fact-finding report is with the Minister, but we have no other information other than that at this time as to what was happening.
Gregory?
Chairman, I think we need to be very careful here. We're in public session, and if we use phrases like, we believe that the report has been with the Minister for a year, and haven't established from the Department, A, if that is the case, and B, what the status of the report is, whatever length of time it has been with them, it then adds fuel to the flames of an ongoing inquiry that we have now been taking part in for 14 months. 14 months, remember, when we are now debating on Monday the first phase of that 14-month-long inquiry. I would be very careful about throwing out insinuations about how long documents have been sitting if we don't know how long they've been sitting. Let's get the facts before we elaborate any more. And just one on, Chairman, the issue about where we're going in terms of who we asked to come to give evidence to us in the course of the next phases of the inquiry. I would have thought the core body that we need to hear from, I've said this on a number of occasions before, is the BBC, people whose programme caused us to be here for 14 months so far, and who, in the process up to date, have been extremely reluctant to come here and answer questions. I think we need to be very careful about what we do in that context. People who broadcast a programme in July last year, and we've spent the period of time since that investigating it, receiving very little assistance from the BBC in the process of doing that. They've declined thus far to come before the committee, and now we're discussing papers that we are informed to some degree may be sitting in the Minister's office. Let's clarify if they are or not, what their status is, and then take a decision then about what we do or say about that at that point when we're more clear about the certainty of it.
Okay, I'll just simply endorse that, what you've said there, and we've agreed a moment ago that by next Thursday we'll hopefully have received material from the BBC, and we will consider that, and I think everybody shares the sentiment that we want to get the BBC as early as we possibly can do, given the importance and the centrality of their role in some of it. So I think people should feel that, and our members, could ask the members' consent, then we simply write to the Minister to ask for the conclusions of the fact-finding exercise. Members happy enough with that?
Sure, just 2 points really. The 14 months, I think everybody accepts the far too long, but surely if the department had been more forthcoming with their if the papers requested, then maybe that problem wouldn't have arisen as much. The other point about the fact-finding exercise, there's a letter here dated the 25th of September 2013, which confirms that the exercise commenced the 20th of August 2013 is now complete. The Department expects to receive the report of the exercise later this week, and once the Department has had the opportunity to fully consider the report, a decision will be made and appropriate next steps in the committee will be updated. So that's taken a year, almost. So, why...
I think the point that was made earlier was the Minister had it a year. There's a difference between the Minister having it and the Department actually having it.
Well,
that's it should be with them next week. It's not actually confirmed that it was with them the following week.
The Minister runs the Department, and the point that I was really making is how long does it take
Okay,
the Department to fully consider a
we've
report?
agreed how we're going to actually proceed on that, so we can kind of move it from that. Okay. Just one final point on that, and this relates to the witness schedule, and this now provides us with after another opportunity. We had in the list, in the scheduled list of witnesses for the 16th of September, we had the Minister and the SPAD invited on that day. Obviously that's now slipped, and we do need to deal with the plant maintenance contract issue. So what I would suggest is then we bring that to that date, and then invite the Minister and the SPAD and the Permanent Secretary and Chair of the Housing Executive to discuss the plan maintenance settlement. And because people were very anxious to get that dealt with.
It's on the 18th.
On the 16th of September.
Day's that?
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Just remind us, what are the timings of the Tuesday sittings?
10:30, you mean these cities, sorry?
No, 10:30. It's not ideal, Chair, but when we'd spoken to members before about times to meet, additional days to meet, Tuesday seemed to be the only day that members could afford.
I think, for example, Tuesday will be a difficult day, a more difficult day for most of us than Thursday. So, to have any of the key witnesses giving evidence on a Tuesday, I think is second best. It would be better to have key witnesses on a Thursday. For example, I noticed that Brian Roundtree, who's pretty central to this, is down for what seems to be a Tuesday. I thought you'd be far better with people like him and the Minister and Special Advisor on a Thursday when people really have an opportunity to be here.
Chair, if members are willing to sit for longer days, we could try to compress witnesses on the Thursday. There may be some logistical issues because of the work that's going on out the back,
Yeah.
but we could try to do that and have longer.
I don't want to prioritise one witness over another, but if there are, if Thursdays are better, I think there's no ideal day, but there is a least worst day. I think Thursday's probably the least worst day. And if we can, if people are amenable to switching, I would prefer that we could try and get people on a Thursday when there's going to be a bigger attendance, hopefully, for a longer part of the meeting.
You mean as opposed to Tuesdays?
No, I mean as opposed to longer sessions. I'm content with the Tuesday, Thursday business, and if there are people coming on a Tuesday that might be able to come on a Thursday, I think we should try and see if we can facilitate that when there's going to be the possibility of a better attendance, because things can happen on Tuesday in the plenary, which might denuded of membership here almost completely, and you may be in court.
Yeah, and if you've witnesses lined up, it's embarrassing. But if, who could say what'll be on the Tuesday morning where all of us might want to be?
Well, maybe we could try and also deal with in a way, Kevin, because we're trying to also deal with ongoing committee business as well. So maybe we could try to use as much of the Tuesday for committee business, so we can take out our Thursday altogether.
Yeah.
We could do that.
We could do that.
We hold
Might help, yeah.
the regular committee businesses on the Tuesday. If members are happy with that, and focus perhaps not entirely, but almost entirely on the inquiry on the Thursday.
So we could try and do that and see how that works for the next few weeks, and then just return to that. Is that fair enough?
Let's try that, I'd suggest.
Okay.
Just one caveat, Chairman. Paula and myself are also on the Assembly Executive Review Committee, and just on one particular Thursday, which is the 25th, we were tied up and wouldn't be available at all on that day.
Thought I'd only ever met for 25 minutes.
Yes, and it has met, I think, on 163 occasions, I think, at the last count, I think. Well, that even exceeds our inquiry.
All right, okay, so we're doing well. Okay, thanks for that. All right, okay. So we can then move on. So anyway, we'll ask Kevin to schedule that. Okay, so
Just one further thing. It struck me as odd that we haven't given Mr. Hayes the opportunity if he wants to say anything. It's like this programme was all about Red Sky and he was the man. Surely we should be giving him the opportunity to...
we need to bear in mind that we're not investigating, this inquiry is not investigating
I know that.
Red Sky, we're not investigating the contracts, if you know what I mean. This is not.
But if there's anything he wants to contribute, should we not give him that opportunity?
I've no difficulty with that. If members want to write to Mr. Hayes and ask on the same basis as others have been asked.
Chair, I think we've been having some difficulty trying to find a contact address, but we can certainly write and ask for a written submission, and then members in the same vein as with the other people who've asked for written submissions,
Okay.
determine whether they want to hear oral evidence.
So are members happy enough with that approach then? Okay, happy with that. Okay, moving on then to the, that's all that matters arising.
Yes.
Okay, moving on then to the next item, which is proposed subordinate legislation. Item 5 on your agenda. So it's an SL1, the Social Security Waiting Days Amendment Regulations. We have Michael Pollock and Rosemary Hughes from the department to address this particular SL1. You're very welcome, Michael and Rosemary, to the committee meeting this morning. Okay. So, remember again, you'll have this SL1 on page 57 of your pack. And without any further ado, Michael, Rosemary, can I invite you just to make the argument for this particular SL1? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Effectively, this is a set of regulations which makes amendment to the existing waiting stays policy for both ESA and JSA. Waiting days, as you'll be aware, have been a feature of these benefits since inception. Have been around the social security system for way on 50 years in that respect. The fundamental principle behind the waiting days policy is that effectively these benefits are not meant to be in place for short periods of unemployment or sickness. In that respect, the Chancellor announced in June last year that he was extending the waiting days from 3 days to 7 days. Effectively, that means that any claim for ESA and JSA would not be paid until the 8th day of the claim, whereas previously individuals' claimants would receive benefit from the 4th days. This is a change to the existing JSA and SL legislation in that respect. It is designed to generate savings that would be used to help people into works, I suppose, as part of the wider reform agenda in general. But effectively, these are regulations that the Minister has cleared would be through the normal negative resolution procedure. They're talking about them coming into operation by late October, 27th of October. You will see from the correspondence that the savings generated or anticipated to be generated from change in waiting days is something in the order of 50 million for the 2015-16 year was anticipated from at a UK level. We've looked at the regulations. If we were to do anything different here in Northern Ireland, it would mean effectively clerical intervention in terms of the assessment of ESA claims and JSA claims. We've looked at the possibility of an IT change, and we're told something of that order would be expensive. We haven't got a total figure on that, but that it would be in the region of 18 months to 24 months before something like that could be implemented. So it is a measure, and I know it's not a term that the committee likes, but it is a parity measure insofar as the regulations will be put into place in the rest of the UK in October. There would be a significant cost for Northern Ireland for to do anything different in that respect. You may also have seen that the regulations were referred to Social Security Advisory Committee, SAC. They've made a number of recommendations, some of which have been accepted, some of which have been partially accepted, and some of which have been rejected. The change in itself is effectively a simple change from 3 days to 7 days. There are no other changes as such to the policy. The existing exemptions would still be in place and everything else. So happy to take questions.
Okay, Michael, thank you. Vicky Brady.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I mean, it's quite a big move in terms of it's a cut, because the 3-day waiting has been around for a long, long time. But it's interesting that in looking at the recommendation 1, it states that it has not, however, been possible to establish the numbers or levels of hardship risk for groups identified by SSAC's response. For example, homeless people, people with mental health issues, and care leavers. Now, it's well established that here in the north we have a much higher level of people with mental health problems than might apply in Britain. So those people are going to be penalised. It's also going to apply to ESA as well, and the recommendation was that it shouldn't. So the bottom line is the people that we should be protecting in this instance are not going to be protected. Now, I know the arguments have been trotted out about the IT system, and that's, you know, so you wonder why really we're actually looking at this kind of stuff, because obviously if that argument's trotted out, it's going to cost $1.5 million approximately in terms of the IT system. What's interesting is it shows you that changes can be made in the IT system, otherwise presumably you wouldn't have costed it. So it's just an interesting point, but ultimately I would be opposed to that because it's going to disenfranchise in terms of benefit for 4 days, because there's an assumption, and it's stated in that people should be able to support themselves for that first week.
It is.
But the difficulty for a lot of people is if you don't do or get a lie-in week or something like that, then you have no money. It's as simple as that.
It is a valid point, Mickey. It is a conscious policy decision that this is a cost-saving measure. You know, I don't think it could be dressed up as anything else in that respect. But it is a conscious policy decision that the benefits are not intended for the support, as I say, short-term interventions or short-term absences from work or short-term sicknesses in that respect. And if you like, the conscious decision is that the money is to be invested, if you want, as opposed to in those 4 days or those additional 4 days benefit. It's to be in labour market interventions to try to get people back into work and to support people into work and to put that money towards those services.
Well, I think the point really I'm making is there's no argument with the fact that getting people back into work, that underlying principle, that should always be accepted. It's better to be working than on benefit. The problem is the particular groups that it highlights here are the most vulnerable, and therein lies the problem.
People will be able to apply for crisis loans when the flight
No,
is
with
cancelled.
respect, I understand all that, but your crisis loan comes out of your benefit. So
Yeah.
if you consider, and I've said this several times, benefit is subsistence level, so if you're paying a crisis loan out of your benefit, and this is by the government's admission, you're below subsistence level. So all it does is create that cycle of poverty, if you like, that never-ending cycle.
It is a valid point, Mickey, but I think it was raised in terms of the SAC report, and government response was that the mitigation in place, whether it be in terms of benefit advances or in our crisis loans, that the mitigations were in place there for to ensure that nobody suffered undue hardship.
That's a matter of opinion.
Okay, Gregory?
Yeah, just on the figures that you've given there, you had indicated, was it in relation to the IT that you said it could be 18 to 24 months, was that it?
That's it, even if it were possible for to actually have this intervention, because it is the JSA, ESSA IT systems that are currently in use, and as you know, the systems across the water are moving more towards the universal credit and that, so there's a serious question to be asked, you know, whether an IT change of this magnitude would be worth doing, if it's going to be a legacy system, or, you know, if it's going to be solely for Northern Ireland purposes.
Yeah, well, that takes us into a wider issue.
Yeah,
And,
I
I
know.
mean, there's always been reference to IT changes, but the problem has been the cost of implementing those separate IT changes. But just so that I'm clear, there's two figures there at 5 and 6. One is the additional clerical costs at 1.37 million per annum. And then there is the Analytical Services Unit providing figures that shows there will be a subsequent cost in the area of 1.62.1 million. And again, that's per annum. That's in respect to the 4 days' worth of benefit payment. But what would happen, those two figures, if we take the lower of your estimate on the IT time of 18 months? Let's not go to the worst-case scenario that you said would be 2 years. If it were to be 18 months, what would the effect be on those two figures?
Well, those are per annum figures for clerical interventions.
Yes.
So you would have to, the rest of the
50%.
UK will be switching across, so you'd have to, from October, when this change comes into effect, you'd have to have clerical interventions for all JSA and ESSA claims from the
Yeah, but if we take the lower of your time frame for the IT, which is 18 months,
Okay.
let us say we were to look at an 18-month time period, does that mean that 1.37 million per annum is actually 2 million, roughly?
Yes,
Right. So that's 2 million costs, minimum.
that's 2 million cost.
Right. Now, does the cost, I presume for the 18-month interim period, that the second figure doesn't change? Because the 4 days, I presume that's just a year-on-year figure.
It's a year-on-year figure.
Right. So, for an 18-month delay in the IT system, are we talking about a total figure of something like 4 million? Of 5 and 6 combined together?
At least, yes, I would say. You're saying the 4 days, the total estimated cost between 2.97 and 3.47 per annum, that's the cost of 4 additional days,
Yeah.
paying off the benefit.
Yes.
If you're paying that per year, that's the cost, so say around 3 million for that, if you're taking some midpoint or 3.1. But if you take 18 months,
Right.
there's another 1.5
Well,
or 1.6.
I'm trying to get to that. What is the global figure looking at an 18-month time frame, which you've said is the bottom end of the scale?
Yeah.
It's the best case scenario, if you like. What's the global figure if you look at the clerical costs and the 4 days benefit? What's the global figure that we're talking about, so that if it comes to a vote here, everybody knows exactly how much, or not exactly, but roughly how much it's going to cost us as a community in Northern Ireland?
On those figures, and they are only estimates, because as I say,
Yep, I understand
there's a
that.
big question over the IT system and whether it's even possible for the get the suppliers for to make that sort of change. But on those figures, you're talking minimum 5.5 million. And my models.
There's an additional cost though, and that is what the change in the IT system would cost, which you haven't factored in here.
The best I could get, and that was only for a very small change, which was the most recent change that we got to the IT system, was for a logo, and it cost 120 grand on its own. Right, but that's a while back, and that was a very simplistic change. This wouldn't be a simple change.
That's a change to the IT system, but that doesn't, if we're moving towards universal credit, the system which deals with JSA and ESA will no longer be in place, so
That's where we get into the broader argument that Gregory was, and it's relevant, but it's irrelevant in the context of these particular regulations, because there is a whole argument as to legacy systems and as to the possibility of Northern Ireland having or not having its own bespoke system, if you like. The fact is, the systems that currently support the benefits are outmoded and outdated. They don't have the base functionality to support rapid changes, if you like, in terms of, say, okay, we take all the Northern Ireland or all the Scotland or all the particular claims out of a particular calculation. It doesn't have that base functionality, which is where the additional costs or the seemingly massive costs, if you like, arise in trying to get something tailored for Northern Ireland purposes.
see if you move to a purely manual system. So I'm out of work for 3 days. How quickly, using a manual system, would it take to process a claim which I would make?
Yeah. It's a question, obviously, where systems are automated. Things are, you would expect that wee bit quicker. It's a question I would have to put to SSA to see in terms of their staffing levels, in terms of processing times, but gives you an indication. We got some breakdown on that figure in terms of the manual interventions as to who does what.
But what I'm trying to get at is, if one of the objections is that somebody who is vulnerable is now no longer able to make a claim until after 7 days have passed, if the vulnerability is around their lack of any money at all, if you move to the kind of manual system which is being suggested here, are they going to get any money in that short period anyway?
No. One of the policy, or one of the issues with this particular change that was raised would be that effectively it doesn't make any difference to when you get your first payment, provided you're on the IT system. You will still get your payment as you would ordinarily get your payment, except it would be less, as you'll be paid from the 8th day as opposed to the 4th day. So in that sense, the systems are such that they can support that change. But if you're doing that manually, then that's another added complication.
I mean, currently it's 14 days is the clearance time, and JSA and ESA claimants are paid fortnightly in arrears. So it sort of, balances itself out. You're probably talking about adding on more extra days to that period if you're talking about a manual workaround.
Okay, we have a number of people here now to come in for Jim and then Maggie.
I'll be brief. It actually quite surprises me. We're talking about a change to the system here that is going to leave people maybe vulnerable for days less money. It actually surprises me is that we've been told by the officials that it'll balance itself, even though it's going to be less. We're taking.
Oh, sorry, I meant the time.
But
it balances itself
we're talking
out.
about people here who, what does it get for a week? £65.50 in a week for JSA and £72.41 for ESA. That I think nobody here has really mentioned the impact that this could have on people. People may go hungry over this here, may not have any fallback position. And I know you mentioned the crisis loan. Sometimes it's not that easy to get a crisis loan. When people go to the yard, turned down, or you have to wait on that coming through. So there's periods. Should we not just say that this is wrong?
You could. It is, as I say, a conscious decision taken that.
Save money.
And I don't think it's been dressed up as anything else, Fran. It is a cost-saving measure, but it is a conscious decision that individuals, when they're first coming to benefits, whether it's JSA or ESSA like that there, that they will have some form of wages or whatever or to support them through that first week. And as I say, in that sense, there hasn't been a change to the waiting days since ever. I don't think so. The conscious decision was taken that this was relative and proportionate to justify policy aims of trying to ensure that JSA and ESSA claims weren't for short periods of interruption. There's also lots of exemptions, as existing exemptions apply. So if there's a linking period, if you've had a claim in the previous, you wouldn't be affected in that respect and things like that. So, as I say, it is a decision that was consciously taken. As I say, I don't think it's been dressed up as anything other than cost saving in that respect, insofar as we're not paying out the money for the first 7 days, but we are putting in place measures to assist people to work and to give support. And as I said, it's a considered opinion that the mitigation that is in place is sufficient in pursuit of the policy objectives.
Before I bring Jim in, I mean, just from my own information, would it be helpful if we're able to get what the exemptions actually are, Michael? And as in recommendation 1 early on, it does refer to that there's no quantification of who are the people who would be homeless and so on, so described as more vulnerable, how many might there be? So is there any possibility of having protection from the department on that, on those two counts?
The exemptions?
Exemptions are probably easier to
The
explain.
exemptions are pretty simple. They're the same categories as have always been exempt in terms of waiting days. The quantification, I think that's recognised in the SAC report and in the government response to it. It is very difficult to disaggregate figures in terms of particular clientele. Mikey talked about mental health and things like that. But the conclusion was that there was no one overly disadvantaged in that respect.
Okay, Michael, thank you for that. Jim and then Mickey, and then we need to move on this one.
Just go back to Gregory's expiration of figures. So what we arrived at was for, to take the 18-month period before you could have any, if you could have any computer upgrade, you're looking at a minimum cost of £5 million.
That's what the figures are saying.
If this proposal doesn't go through and we don't make these changes, that's then £5 million to be found within the Northern Ireland Block Grant,
Yes, it would.
and thereby reducing other opportunities for that spend.
Effectively, yes.
And the £5 million doesn't end there, because they're then in perpetuity as the 1.6 million plus per annum. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
So, and you say that could be up to 2.1, so in round figures, it's 5 million for the next 18 months and then something approaching 2 million for every year thereafter. Is that right?
It's big numbers.
All to be found within the block grant.
All to be found, but at the same time, it's creating bigger problems, if you like, in terms of disparity between the systems and in terms of the UK system as it's operating, and in particular, I would say, the IT system as we move forward.
And without an
Whatever way we
IT
go.
system for this 18 months, these clerical costs, that's literally people making manual changes to benefits.
It is.
Like I recall, I went to days with my students, days working for a summer during one of the summers in the civil service in Frederick Street, manually making changes to benefit books. That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about in terms of the
SSA staff would have to go in and interrupt the IT, which would be set up for the 7 days.
Yes.
They'd have to intervene so that payment could be made from the 4th day
for Northern
if
Ireland.
Northern Ireland didn't introduce any changes.
Yeah. And they'd have to be
And they would have to keep doing that.
keep doing that and be
Yeah,
trained in doing that.
yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
Mickey, final comment.
I worked in Frederick Street too, but I don't think it was the same time as Mr. Allister. At least I don't recall him being there. Just a couple of points. I mean, Sammy made the point about people wouldn't get paid necessarily any sooner, but the reality is they're raising job seekers £37 plus, and ESA £41 plus. So when you do get that money, if you've got into debt for those people, those categories that were mentioned, then it might be easier to pay off. And I presume the clerical payments would be for new claims as opposed to ongoing claims. So
Yes.
obviously it depends. That would be predicated on the number of new claims, and we've been told, thankfully, that the number of people claiming job seekers is constantly going down. So really, the figure that we're talking about is fairly speculative in that sense. In wider terms, when you talk about the system being geared for universal credit, it's very clear from what has happened so far that the IT system for universal credit simply isn't working and is unlikely to work in the near future, because they can't get a system which actually deals with it. They've written off, I think, 142 million in their pilot scheme. There's 5,000 people on, and there should be 1.5 million. So huge problems around that. But as Greg has said, that's a wider issue, I think, for a different day. But all I really wanted to do in this case is make the point that the most vulnerable people in our society who are going to be affected, who we should be protecting, those are the ones that are going to suffer directly as a result of this. It's a simple fact. And you know, we talk a lot about the economic cost, rarely do we talk about the human cost. That's the issue.
But the data that we have currently in relation to JSA claimants, the data indicates that 59% of on new JSA claimants, and in 2013-14 there were an average of 6,103 per month. 59% of new people will be affected, which means that 41% won't be affected because they will fall within the exempted categories. In relation to ESA, it's similar. It's only an indication, but we reckon 50% of all new ESA claimants will not be affected because, again, they will fall into the exempted categories. And for 2013-14, there were 2,106 new ESA claims per month.
But some of those ESA claimants will be because their statutory sick pay or whatever has reduced.
Yes,
so they won't be
yes.
in the same category because they're going to be getting half pay or whatever. So, you know, it's really the people who are really going to be affected are the people who don't have any other source of income.
Yeah, well,
But it is a conscious decision.
Of course, it's an ideological decision.
Yeah, well, I mean, in fairness to Michael and Rosemary, I mean, they've just explained that it is a conscious policy decision. It's not dressed up as anything else, and that we're given the consequences of not implementing that. So, you know, we're basically been asked as a committee content that the SL1 be made, and then it'll return as an SR. But so that's the proposition. As a committee content that the SL1 be made.
Agreed.
Great.
I disagree.
I disagree. So then just take a vote on that then. Okay. So show of hands for those in favour that the SL1 be made. Okay. Those against? Okay, that falls. Okay, sorry, the SL1 is consented to by the committee. Okay, members, thank you. Michael, thank you. And Rosemary, thank you.
Just for clarification, so as we're clear, this matter now proceeds by negative resolution.
Yeah.
And that means normal course of events that will be made. So this piece of welfare reform has been navigated through the Assembly.
This item here.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you'll know that these matters are ongoing.
How can this piece be stopped?
Aye.
Yes.
Don't understand your question.
Well, it's negative resolution. It would take a resolution of the House to negative it. Isn't that right?
In terms of a prayer of annulment?
Yes.
For this item, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in the event of that not
which
succeeding,
would be £5 million.
Sorry?
The consequence of which would be £5 million.
But in the event of a prayer of annulment not succeeding, this piece of welfare reform is successfully passing through the Assembly.
Well, this SL1 was coming SR was go through on that basis. You're making a point, yeah.
This isn't, can I just clarify, this isn't in the welfare reform.
Yes, that's the point I was going to
This
make.
is drawn, if you like, from existing primary legislation. So this is a change to existing rules and regulations as such. It isn't, and that's why ordinarily these sorts of regulations would be by negative resolution.
That's how this can be done by this route.
Yes.
But this is
This is not part
Any
of
of the new
package.
policy changes, the likes of under occupancy or asset time limiting or anything like that, that's still contained within the welfare reform bill.
Yeah.
That's still subject to the will of the
a
Assembly.
street bill, which has provisions over certain elements not taken out from most. So,
But there's
separate
such a
issue.
body of legislation on social security that some of the stuff that we're talking about, and particularly this, is drawn its powers from the existing legislation, primary legislation.
I think this committee has more statutory rules, I think, than any other, isn't that right? If I'm-
It's not part of the enabling
It's
legislation.
not part of the welfare reform, but I'll deal with
It's
it.
not part of that bill as such,
Okay.
but part of the wider reform agenda, if you like, insofar as that's
It's not the welfare reform bill, that's it.
Is it the name that's putting you boys off?
Sorry?
Is it the name that's just putting you off?
What?
Anyway, let's have no more discussion on this matter. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Roger. Moving on then.
Do you think the people as it sounds?
Excuse me, folks. Trevor. Okay, we're moving on then to the next item, which is item number 6, SR 203, Pensions 2012 Act. You'll find this on page 66 of your pack. Our members, it's a commencement order. Members can have to note the commencement order date. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 7, SR 204, Pensions Transitional Consequential and Supplementary Regulations. Page 69, you'll have that in your pack. Okay, so this was considered as an SL1 at the 19th of June meeting in 2014, and at that stage, members were content for the rule to be made. Are members content for the rule to be made? Okay, if that's the case. If that's the case, then I read into the record that the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 204 2014, the Pensions 2012 Act, Transitional, Consequential and Supplementary Regulations, Northern Ireland 2014, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objections to the rule. All agreed? Okay, members, thank you. Next item, SR 2013, the Pensions 2012 Act, so on and so forth. This is on page 166 of your pack. Again, this was considered as an SL1 on the 19th of June, and members were content for the rule being as members are, I will read into the record. Okay, that the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 2013 to 2014. Sorry, statutory rule 213. 2014, the Pensions 2012 Act, Consequential and Supplementary Regulations, Northern Ireland 2014, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, recommend to be confirmed by the Assembly. All agreed? Thank you. Next item is correspondence. Just a couple of items are, which I want to draw your attention to. Page 232 of the pack, the DFM committee has written to the committee seeking input and is requiring the building a united community. And just to remind members then that this committee obviously has a very, very busy work programme. I think it would be difficult to schedule this as a substantive item and then give it due consideration. But if the committee, of course, does wish to make a submission to the inquiry, it would have to be finalised by the 25th of September at the latest, just to allow for the processing of it. So members do not, what I was going to suggest, that members do not indicate before the 18th of September that they wish to make a submission, and their response will automatically be submitted by Kevin on behalf of the committee to the OFM committee. Members content with that? Okay, so if we don't hear from people with an alternative view on the 18th of September, then there'll be a nil response table. Of course, all the parties will, members will have an opportunity to input into the inquiry if they so wish. Okay, so we have on page 236 of your pack, the Committee for Finance Personnel has covered their research paper on year-end surges and departmental expenditure. It has been suggested that the committee would write to DSD for an explanation of the year-end surges shown on page 283 of our packs. And we could then also ask for copies of those explanations provided to DAP as required by the outturn and forecast outturn guidance. Members content to proceed with that? Okay. Page 299 of the pack you'll find from the Old Housing Association. They've invited members to an event this Friday, 5th of September, fixing Ballymena. Members wish to attend that, they can attend. I know Kevin's going to attend also. Okay, so if anybody wishes to attend, please advise the committee staff. Okay, so Maggie Brady, you want to?
Fine.
Okay. And just to, in terms of the remaining correspondence, the members content to deal with that as per the memo?
Sure. I just bring one aspect of the correspondence up, and it's in relation to the SD letter on the June monitoring round. That part of it, then some that's been raised here before, and it's in relation to the 15 million bid for ownership. just looking at some of the figures that's been provided there, it says there was almost an equal amount of what's called affordable houses provided as there was social houses, and yet the states are quite clearly that there's a 400 waiting list for co-ownership and a 40,000 waiting list for social new build. And I think we need to raise that because there's a great inequality there in the provision of social housing for those who require it.
And do you propose to write the Minister or?
I would propose that.
Chairman, I would be opposed to that. I mean, I think that the kind of comparison that FRA is making is not a correct comparison. The fact of the matter is that, first of all, there's considerable added value to the housing finance through co-ownership, because, of course, not only is there the money which comes from the department, but there's also the money which the individuals bring in the form of mortgage money and the loans which the co-ownership housing association can draw in as well to finance this. Secondly, it does, in a manner which is quite cheap, reduce pressure on the social housing waiting list, because many of those who purchase the homes would otherwise have been seeking social housing. And thirdly, it is affordable housing for many people who are on low income. And the fourth thing is that it reduces housing costs considerably for people who currently find that they can't get into the social housing sector and go into the private rented sector, because the comparisons show that there's, in most cases, about a 40% saving on the average new house price bought under co-ownership than what there would be if a person was having to rent a similar house in the private sector. So, I mean, for all of those reasons, I do not want, at least I certainly am opposed to any indication from this committee that we believe that there should be a switch of resources away from the co-ownership housing to social housing, given the fact that we've already received considerable evidence as well that the housing associations are at their capacity, and even if the additional money is available, given planning restraints, given land availability, and given their ability to raise finance and their willingness to raise finance.
Could I suggest, could I suggest that we're in danger of making a substantive item out of a piece of correspondence, which has been a very important issue raised. So, in a way, the matter has been raised by a member. It's ongoing discussions and deliberations between the committee and the department. Some members have different views on it. So, can I just say that
The first time I've raised this,
I know you haven't raised it, and we have raised it with the department. It will come up again, and so we were having early opportunities to discuss, an ongoing opportunity to discuss the social housing reform programme and so on and so forth, and other policy matters. We have to discuss the department, the monitor around repercussions and what have you. So we'll deal with it as a substantive. But you'll raise it when we have the officials in the department here. So you were asking just for a letter. Well, we're going to have a substantive political discussion around housing and affordable housing, which we're not going to have at this moment.
It's also a discussion we need to have, Chair.
No, that's not a problem. That'll be done. That'll be part of our ongoing deliberations, bro. Okay, so I just want to, we're in danger of having a major discussion there. The members have already agreed to adopt the correspondence as per the memo. And a final item there, just before we go into the forward programme again, that's, members note that on page 314, and that's again always a moving feast, so to speak. Under AOB, we had the proposition some time ago around potential study visits to other jurisdictions around housing development programmes. Could I suggest, and we haven't actually taken that forward or taken any form of recommendations forward, and we know the committee's obviously very, very busy, but could we also just then, given that we have discussed this before, could we be content then that the clerk here would consult with other stakeholders with a view to looking at some options to go and visit some of these locations, okay? Because we've been asked to do so by the department, by stakeholders, by the Minister and others. So I don't want just to lapse into forgetting about it, okay? Nothing else on or any other business? If not, then meetings will stand for the forward work plan. I will, we noted the forward work program.
Just that way, please.
Okay, members, the meeting stands adjourned and back to next week. Thank you very much, members. Thank you.
Committee room